This screencast will serve two functions. First, we'll use this as a brief introduction to the MLA International Bibliography. To be perfectly honest, in my humblest of humble opinions, I think this is where we should always start our research. Actually, let me correct myself. Once we're ready to dig into the library resources, that is, once we have a sense of possible search terms to use, the MLA International Bibliography should be our first go-to. It's not that other databases aren't useful, and it's not that the library catalog isn't useful. But for literary studies, this is our major database. The MLA International Bibliography indexes not all, but much, if not most, of the scholarship published on literature. Here's how they describe themselves. The MLA International Bibliography provides a subject index for books and articles published on modern languages, literatures, folklore, and linguistics. It is compiled by the staff of the MLA Office of Bibliographic Information Services with the cooperation of more than 100 contributing bibliographers in the United States and abroad. Available online, the MLA International Bibliography annually indexes over 66,000 books and articles. That's right, 66,000. So in other words, it's more comprehensive. And as a bibliography, what it's going to do ultimately is provide us, after we do our searches, with a list of resources on a particular topic. Thus, unlike a resource like JSTOR, it will include not only articles, but books, dissertations, book reviews, etc. It's easier to search than JSTOR and more comprehensive than JSTOR, and thus it makes it a really good starting point. Generally speaking, if we find something in our library catalog, we might also find that through an MLA search. That is not to say, however, that we should only do MLA searches. MLA is a really good starting place. We see what hits we get, and from there we can go start searching our library catalog. But we also still want to do those separate searches on the library catalog because it could be that the search terms we use to look for something in MLA will not necessarily turn up what we find by using the same searches or the search terms in the library catalog. So all of this to say, MLA is a really good starting point. It is very comprehensive in what it indexes, but that it is not the only resource we should use. Again, starting point, not the only one. So what I want to do is just show you how to get there, and we'll do a couple of searches. If you're not sure what search terms to use, one thing you can do is actually go to Wikipedia. Let's see. So let's do Faulkner. Wikipedia. We'll just go to William Faulkner. There we go, since we're talking about a rose for Emily. So here we go. Here's Yoknapatawpha. I mentioned Yoknapatawpha County today. So this might be a possible search term. Here are some different novels that he has written. What we can do to use Wikipedia is to actually read through the information and see what terms are repeated a lot, see what terms stand out to us, and use those to help us create different searches on MLA or any other database for that matter. One of the things to keep in mind when you're using MLA is that, like our library catalog algorithm, we're going to have to search terms both in singular and plural quite frequently. We're going to have to search multiple we're going to have to search synonyms of words. We're going to have to search different forms of a word. So, for example, the infinitive and the gerund form of a word, for example. So we're going to have to play around with the kinds of words that we use, the forms of words that we use. One of the things I really recommend is that you keep a running list of all of the searches that you have already done so that you're not repeating yourself. So what I've done is I've gone to the database list. I'm just going to do a search. As you can see up here, Control F pops up my search bar. I'm going to MLA International Bibliography, and I'm already signed in. So if you are on any computer, on campus or otherwise, you're going to have to sign in. So I'm going to do a search term just for Faulkner, William, and let's see. Let's just start there. Let's see what we get. And 7,072 is a lot. So we might want to find ways to limit it. 1931, that's pretty old. We might want to see what happens if we bump this up to, let's go with 1990, right? Remember, we want to think about the contemporary conversation on a text. That's not to say that something from 1980 or 1970 couldn't be really useful or really important. But again, what's the current conversation? 1990 was a long time ago. So the conversation has probably changed quite a bit depending on what you're looking for. So that's still a lot of search terms. So I'm going to exclude dissertations. That limits it, but not by much. A couple of other limiters you have here. Here is the linked full text. If I click on this, what it's going to do is it's going to limit my search to anything that our library gives us access to. That's really cool. But what's not cool is when we only use a linked full text search and potentially miss resources that we may not have at our library or that we may not have access to through the EBSCOhost database products. It could be that we actually do have electronic access to the Journal of American Literature, Culture, and Theory, but that we just may not have access to it through EBSCOhost. And what we would have to do is go look up this journal in our library database. So MLA is a starting point, but we may not necessarily find the linked full text. We can also limit by language. So that's another way we can limit. We can limit by doing subject searches. Let's see. Where am I? There we go. Subjects all. See what that does for us. That didn't do much. We're already limited. We have time period searches. Here we go. So if you're studying Renaissance literature, you can limit your search by a particular time period. Generally, we're going to go by centuries. So 1500 to 1599, 1600 to 1699, so on and so forth. You can limit by language, by genre, by type, so article or book, dissertation. We have a lot of ways to limit and narrow our search. I am going to put in gender. So here's another way we might be able to limit. And that takes us down to 89. And I'm going down here. Notice we have our Boolean search again. And notice we can keep adding to our Boolean search and keep adding all sorts of terms. I'm going to limit here by adding rows for Emily. I'm going to put it in quotation marks. And that gets us down to 3 sources. So this is a very specific search. It's a starting point. Let's see. These are all fairly recent, so that's very useful. And one of the things that we can do is click on the different hits we get and look at the subject areas here and the subject terms here, right? These are different ways that we can limit our searches. For example, I can do primary subject work and just go ahead and click on a rose for Emily and see what's out there in the MLA International Bibliography on A Rose for Emily. We've got 117 sources from 1954 up to 2015. Again, right, we can go through the process of trying to limit. We might want to look for things focused specifically on gender. Now, 117 sources, that might take you about 20 or 30 minutes to slog through. And with 117 hits, I would honestly take the time to go through and read all of the titles to see which ones are useful for us. That is, again, part of the work of research and part of or a reminder that research isn't necessarily instant gratification. Again, it won't take us very long to go through and find things. With MLA and any EBSCO product, you can, and I don't know if this is going to work for me, so I will, oh, I already have a login. Let's see if it works. Oh, good. So you can create an EBSCO account. It's separate from your school account. You just create an EBSCO account, and then what you can do is you can save information. And so I'll show you what I have saved. And I've been saving this stuff for years. So these are different projects that I've been working on. And these different folders that I've created to save my searches. Right, so I've got 37 articles. Generally, what I'll do when I create a new folder is I'll label it with the different search terms that I've used. But this is one way to store our work so that we're not having to create the same searches over and over and over again, because quite frankly, that's not fun at all. So I'll go into one of my folders and show you some of the things you can do. You can print your list, you can email it, you can save it as a file. If you email it to yourself, you'll usually get an option just to show you what'll happen. I always like to email it to 2 different addresses at once, just in case something happens with one and it doesn't go through. Whenever available, I always ask it to send me HTML full text and PDF as a separate attachment. I like to put the subject search terms or the search keyword, whatever search terms I used, I like to put that information in the subject line or the comments so that, again, I can keep track of this information. Part of being a good researcher is being an efficient researcher. Let's see. So let's go back. Let's do a new search. Once we have found sorry about that pause there. Once we have found some different sources to look for, what we want to do if we don't have access to the full text here, or if it's a book, is to go to the library website and see if we have it. If we don't have the journal, if we don't have the book via our library, we can order through ILL, or we can check the UNT website. Keep in mind that as students at TWU, you have access to other academic libraries. You have access to UNT, just by dint of being a student here. You take your ID over there to their circulation desk. They'll get you all set up. I think you get the books for about 3 weeks. If you are physically in the UNT library, you will also have access to their electronic resources, which means you have access to a lot of information that we don't necessarily have access to here. You can also go to the circulation desk at our TWU library and apply for a text share card, which allows you to access other academic libraries in the state of Texas. It's pretty cool. So start with MLA, find different searches to use. We've looked up gender. We might do Rose for Emily and race. We could look up Deep South, right? It kind of depends on what our topic is going to be. And our topic, our research question, those things are going to drive the kinds of searches that we do. Now, what happens if you get nothing? That's okay. You might need to broaden your search a little bit, or it could be that nobody has made the argument that you've made yet, or that rather nobody has made the argument that you want to make. Remember that when we use these sources, we're not using them to make our claims for us. We're using them to support our claims. It could be that we also need to do a little bit of paradigm shifting. So maybe we look up race or gender in some of Faulkner's other stories, or scholarship on race and gender in some of Faulkner's other stories. And then we shift the paradigm to say, much as so and so says race functions in this way in this story, so too does it function in this way in A Rose for Emily. So we kind of have to think bigger here, right? We don't necessarily want to find only sources that are saying what we want to say, because then why are we saying it? I had intended to add a little bit more information about this week's readings to this screencast. So what I'm actually going to do is start another one. Sorry about that. And this time around, I promise I will do my best to keep it under 15 minutes, at least for the last one. Be right back.